Hey there, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 82 with JP Novin. So this is a fun conversation exploring kind of the entirety of JP's journey all the way from high school up into his current position as the CEO and founder of PLEXUSS, which is a great digital platform that connects students with great opportunities within higher education. So definitely do connect with him and the work that he's doing. But just really appreciated his time. I do believe that this is the first episode where you'll see, or hear rather, explicit mention of coronavirus. So I did make the decision to kind of keep consistent with my kind of content stream that I had coming your way. So I'm not making any kind of major shifts or disruptions to respond to the current pandemic. I know sometimes I do need a break from that onslaught of information, how things are changing. So hopefully this is also helpful to you as well, finds you in good spirits, and helps you to professionally develop for, certainly this moment will end for however long it goes on, but, we kind of still need to press onward and develop ourselves comprehensively. So yes, hope you are well. Hope all is good in your world. And thank you so much for listening to this episode, number 82 with JP Novin. I really appreciate you taking the time out this morning to chat for the podcast. A good kind of serendipitous connection that is one of many, I think, that will be coming on the podcast kind of in the aftermath of South by Southwest EDU, unfortunately being canceled, but I'm so happy that we're still able to talk for the podcast here. So really quick, if you just want to introduce yourself and give a brief overview of your professional journey and how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, good to be here. My name is JP Novin. I'm currently the CEO of PLEXUSS. My journey has been, I've worked for large corporations like Microsoft, but this is essentially my third company that I've started. My first one was Voice over IP that was serving underdeveloped countries with VoIP technologies. My second one was mobile advertising and app development, and this one is in higher education. So basically, I've just been a pinball machine experimenting with different things. This is higher education is the one that I've landed on that I'm most passionate about. I've been at this since 2011 and still going strong.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I guess in terms of obviously, you've done a diversity of things through your kind of professional career and everything, but kind of hearkening back to kind of your origin story and kind of thinking back to your own college experience. Are there kind of moments or things that you did or people that you met, anything that you still feel like is salient to you, things that you learned still kind of comes up for you personally and or professionally?
Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to high school just a little bit, just to give you that kind of sets the stage of why this is such an important initiative for me, and then I'll jump into high school. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so when we came here with my family from Iran when I was 12 and a half, moved to Tallahassee, Florida for a year. My mom was pursuing her PhD in economics at FSU. Then we moved to California a year later. And, when I got into high school, I decided not to be a good student, just wanted to take in the cultural experience coming from a very different background. And, my grades really suffered. I was actually sent to a remedial high school and basically, suspended from high school, normal high schools. Mm-hmm. The experience was so difficult for me just to swallow that experience that I went back to normal high school and just talked to my counselor, and they said, look, you're not going to graduate high school until you're 21. You've lost 2 years of high school. There's no way you're going to graduate. And that challenged me to finish high school in 2 years rather than 4 years and really caught up. But that really took me back to my parents, who were very, very in tune with education, and I knew they care about it. They instilled those values on me when I was very young, and so I just went to high school, went to community college, realized that in my first semester I got a C and a D in community college, but essentially I turned things around, ended up at UCLA. and it was a phenomenal turnaround story for everyone. It's like, how could this kid who barely graduated high school end up at a decent university and graduate and top of his class and all this other stuff? Once I was graduating from UCLA, I started working for UCLA Alumni Fund and started really getting really interested in calling the UCLA alumni, asking him to give money to the school. And I did so well in raising money for a general fund that they had a challenge fund, which was for public health at that time, and I raised the most money out of anyone for that as well. As far as the students calling outbound, and that experience really stuck with me. That how important it was for colleges to be supported by their alumni, and what an important community university is. So that stuck with me, and to this day, I really cherish that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing all that of just like, yeah, from those sort of like, I imagine, yeah, like rebellious teenage years of just kind of pushing back against education, even though like, fundamentally in your core, like you said, like you knew that that was something that your family valued and, that you eventually did kind of come back around and put a lot of energy and effort into it. And it really kind of bore out some great results for you. And yeah, just I'm sure it was really awesome speaking with all those alumni and kind of seeing like, wow, like this was the impact that I had for other people, and just really continuing to kind of crystallize like how powerful higher education can be for people, and the unique experiences that people have that shape who they are. So yeah, that's really awesome. So, that kind of gets us back towards your current work. So, and I guess, again, if you want to kind of put things a little bit into context, because I know the work that you're doing now is sort of like education technology, really trying to help enable colleges to, and I guess more so like help students primarily to kind of bridge that gap between high school and college. So, yeah, I guess kind of carry us through quickly if you want, kind of to where you are now, your current work, what that is, and what you're sort of enjoying most about that work. And we'll kind of go on from there.
Yeah, I mean, look, after my last company, I sold that company and really wanted to know, what do I want to do next? Do I want to go work for another company in Silicon Valley, or do I want to start a new company? And I looked around, started teaching a little bit at the UC Berkeley, teaching course to adult learners and thinking about higher education in general. And what stood out to me was that we have pretty much a destination site for everything out there. I mean, if you want to buy shoes back then, there was Zappos. Obviously, you go to Amazon and shop. You could find a pizza shop through Yelp. Professional networks had, LinkedIn, everything pretty much had a destination site. And higher education, back then was well over $1 trillion. Now it's about $1.7 trillion of student debt. And I could really not find a site that I could say, truly, this is where students go objectively to communicate, to learn more, and they feel safe. It's a safe environment, and it's a trusted environment to do the research and really mingle with their friends and various alumni and current students in colleges. How do we build a community and a destination site for students? And really, as we got deeper into this, we've created one of the largest on-demand resources for how to think about higher education and career outcome. But in the midst of it, this project became immensely more interesting because we noticed that the number of high school, college counselors in high schools is 1 in 500. Only 40% of students are graduating within 4 years. 3 million less students are actually going to college as opposed to 10 years ago. And especially when you start looking at, disenfranchised and disadvantaged students who don't have a strong family who's gone to college around them, they just don't know where to start. They don't have a fair chance. So not only have we created a site for everyone, but especially if you're a student who doesn't have a network, now you come to Plexus and have a network and all these research tools available to us, to you. So we're definitely giving access to all students at no charge. Everyone has access to it. And pretty much anyone who raises their hand and says we want to go to college, we're going to help you at no charge and get you to an education destiny that is going to get you the best career outcome.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, and I guess it sounds like you're saying like it kind of was, this coalescing of this current moment and, your background and experiences that all kind of came together. Like, did you kind of have like an epiphany about that? Like, did it just sort of like strike you in the middle of the night or something? Because it is really like sort of a simple idea and premise, but like an execution and done, at scale and those sort of things, obviously has some really meaningful sort of outcomes and everything. So like, how did it sort of like come to you? And I guess, you've been doing it now for several years. Like, what's been keeping you excited about doing it, kind of day in and day out?
First of all, it's very personal, right? I mean, there are a lot of JPs in high school today who just feel they don't have a chance, right? So it really came from a personal experience in evening the playing field for everyone, and that everyone should have a chance to get an education. I think that is the core of our democracy, for people to have option and a chance to learn. But the idea came to me, it was kind of like, what do I like to do? I love higher education. I always was intrigued with education. Higher education has changed my family. I mean, my siblings, they're all highly educated. It's impacted and changed our lives as a family. And I just thought, look, what is it that I care about, and how can I set up a company that's mission driven, yet it has no boundaries. So that's what I cared about. Mission-driven stuff that I'm passionate about without any boundaries. And higher education was one of those, few ideas that popped up that I just said, I got to do something around this. I wasn't sure, frankly, when we first started building this. Our projection was, look, if we're able to get 5,000 people in our first year, we considered it a success. We didn't have any lofty goals of millions of people coming to the site. We just said, let's build it. We'll figure it out. And, when we saw thousands of students just clustering around the site, it was definitely a great gift for the vision that kind of rested. So it's a personal, it just is, it's an evolving. Ideas they're not fast food. They're really like a souffle. It just takes a long time for it to kind of sit in, and all of a sudden you go, okay, this could be a good dish, and this could be something that, that I could do for the rest of my life, and it just evolved. It's an idea that's been building for the last 20, 30 years for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, even just like whatever each day kind of brings to you, like that's sort of like, you're committed to that core, to the kind of the heart of the work that you do every day, and just being able to, kind of follow through on something where it's like, yeah, like you'd want to be working, and maybe like you didn't maybe originally think like all that time ago that like, oh, I'd be creating a, digital platform to do these, but like, wanting to give back and wanting to work in this space and, give what you can and everything. It's just really awesome that you have been able to do that. And, yeah, I think it's just really cool to see.
I've been blessed. I mean, I've definitely been blessed in my own life, and after you see what you have, you just feel like, what's going to get me up. And anyone who knows me knows that I start really, really early every morning. If you're not passionate and you don't love what you do, then getting up is a hard thing. If you could find something that's just you just can't wait to start, early in the morning and get to it, then you're blessed. So I have something that really motivates me to start early in the morning and push as hard as I can, because it's not just a business for us. If I look back to my life and I go, look, we were able to change distinctly the lives of people, doing something that we loved. What could be better than that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of any more things. Because yeah, I mean, it is. I get just like the idea too of like, certainly like moving that needle on getting more people access to higher education, and then all those people also are better informed and better supported to choose like the right institution, the right program, and just being more knowledgeable about their options and those sort of things. And that's always just, I mean, a good thing for everybody. Because, like I said, I mean, like student loan debt comes into the equation, people not completing their degrees, even if they started, or, any of those things. And I think, because, yeah, it's just, there's so much that even just, one person can do in terms of like being that kind of counselor to help sort of bridge the gap of, like you said, people who just don't really have any knowledge or exposure to higher education, just being able to like, kind of demystify things, just clear things up. It's just like, yeah, great that you can be doing that work and supporting that, and seeing really great results from it. So, and I guess in terms of you're doing this work with the social mission and kind of education technology, higher education. There's obviously a lot of complexities to all those sort of things, but then also anything I guess personally that you do for fun or like a hobby. But like I'm really curious, what are you geeking out about right now? What's grabbing your attention? And just kind of talking through that a little bit.
What I'm geeking out about the last year has been creating the right habits. Both personally, I've always been pretty in tune about making sure we have a good company culture, people around me. So I just think if you, as for myself, it's all about, creating the right habits and being able to improve on a daily basis. That's a one personal thing that I have, but it permeates everything that we do, even our own company, which is, how do we become a living organism that is always improving and is always learning. And the funny thing is, when I look at my ideas from 10 to 20 years ago and I go, God, I was so stupid, and then I go, I'm sure 10, 20 years from now, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to have the same probably response to where I am today. So I know my ideas are going to evolve. So how do I find more and more people who could help me and be just a little bit smarter and push me ahead in time? So it's really about self-evolvement and realizing on how limited I am as one person and why. Because once you get to that point, then you're going to say, look, I can't solve the higher education matters alone. Our company can't do it alone. So how do we create an ongoing community that is constantly learning, is constantly growing? This all goes into building the right habits. So I'm passionate about a few things in life. I constantly listen or read books about these topics. And many more. I love playing basketball and soccer. I'm a sports enthusiast, and I love those sports. I play them, I watch them. I'm highly into them, and the rest of my time is I'm a very boring person. So I hang out. I have 3 kids, so I spend a lot of time with obviously my wife, and I spend a lot of time around that and making sure that it's not just about people outside that we're trying to impact, but making sure that we are raising our kids to be good citizens of the world. So outside of work, raising our kids, a little bit of sports, a little bit of reading, it's just exhaustion, going home every night and just pretty much fainting from exhaustion. So there's nothing else I could give.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in terms of like all those habits, it's like, I mean, it's probably like a good exhaustion because it's like, I mean, potentially like physically, you have like good physical habits and mental habits, and then just like, in terms of like relationships with like family, coworkers, whatever, it's like, you kind of have to look at it like a habit, I think, because like you said, it's almost like, a living thing. If you have a team, an organization, a company, like the culture, and just sort of like, how does it feel to be here and working every day and those sort of things? Like you can't just like put that plant on, the windowsill and just like let it be. It's like, no, you got to like nurture it. You got to, water it. You got to check on it. You got to, those sort of things. And hopefully it's just growing and becoming like, and blossoming and all that. But that does require time and attention. Like, so, whether it's work relationships or family relationships and all this other things. So I feel, I give you a lot of credit as much as I can imagine, it's like all doing all those things. It's exhausting at the end of the day, but it's like, it's all time well spent. So, certainly kudos to you for, balancing all those things.
Well, it is, but every time we interview someone to work at our job, I one of the things I tell them, and everyone tells me, don't tell this to people. It's just not a good thing to tell them. I go, on the surface, not only am I boring, but the company may seem boring, right? But it's not that we're boring; it's that we figured out certain things that work, and we repeat them, and there's certain things that we have to evolve in, and so if predictability is boring, then yes, we're very boring. From just like, when we start our meetings every day, how we organize, how we tackle problems. So we've kind of built a lot of formulaic ways of tackling stuff so we don't waste our time on things that don't require a lot of brain calorie. And then after that, we want to use our mind in figuring out how do we solve bigger problems rather than worrying about daily routines.
Yeah. No, yeah, and I mean, I think that's like an interesting thing I've started to realize, and maybe it's just because I'm like just starting to get a little bit older, but just like those companies that are just sort of more like, I don't know, just like maybe kind of lean in the sense of like not a lot of like sort of loud or sort of like sizzle and no substance kind of thing, like you've got to be like kind of on your details and growing responsibly and like really thoughtful and those sort of things versus just sort of like disruptive for the sake of it and just going, kind of wild and whatever, because it's like, it's more catchy. It's more sort of appealing to, I think, certain people for a little while, but you do want a place where it's like pretty organized and like, what to expect and there's a plan and like those sort of thing, like it's sort of like, like moderation in all things. Like, you don't want it to be like a regimented, like, just like, dystopic, like totalitarian, like order or something. But like, it's like you do want to have, I think, a semblance of, like how is this meeting going to go? Are we going to like, actually be getting things done and, all this sort of, I could definitely appreciate that sort of, the quote unquote boring, sort of vibe. I feel like it's very, very responsible, tend to be, somewhat of an organized person myself. So I guess maybe predisposed to that kind of thing, but, no, yeah, I mean, and that's, I think, it's all good stuff, and I think, it's just, kind of funny how some people might consider it boring, but, I would say the opposite, I guess, just personally, so I appreciate that.
I mean, if you look at this whole, we're in the middle of this coronavirus craziness. Hopefully, we'll listen to this podcast later, and this will just be kind of, oh my God, coronavirus was looked like such a disaster, but ultimately it's resolved and we're moving forward. But I mean, it's about, can anyone catch coronavirus? Absolutely. But what are some of the habits that we could do to prevent it, right? So it's the same thing, washing your hand on an hourly basis or drinking warm water, whatever that takes. It's just making sure we follow that discipline, because that allows us to at least diminish the risk.
Right.
It doesn't guarantee you. And even as an organization, we don't know if we're going to be around a year from now. I mean, uncertainty. Anytime you start a company, you just have to expect that you might not be around a year from now, as much as you want to be, right? But let's diminish the risk. And let's make sure that we could get past any difficulty. So this topic of habit, as you can see, I'm infatuated about it. I think students, everyone, if they create the right habits, we'll spend a lot less time trying to solve mistakes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I can come up in a lot of ways. I mean, like good study habits, physical health habits or mental health habits, like any of that kind of stuff, and just like relationships. So yeah, I mean, it's really good. Yeah, I mean, just for, I think people will be thoughtful because yeah, I mean, literally in this moment, like being organized and disciplined, like can literally save lives. Like it's very important.
Yes,
So yeah, which I guess it just like it's like a very like nerdy hill to like shout from of
it
just like,
is.
come on, everybody, let's be more organized. But it's very important. But well, yeah, I mean, on this topic or just anything else, I guess, just in terms of, sort of like what's grabbing your attention and those sort of things.
Well, I want to talk a bit about higher education. I think the way we're consuming education is shifting so dramatically in front of our eyes. So, if you go back 30 years, if you had a university, people would apply to it, and you would essentially go to university for many reasons, but chiefs amongst them was you would go to have access to the libraries, to research, to learning, to finding information. Well, guess what? In 2020, you could go to Google and you could research the web and get access to information. And not only can you get access to information, but you could go to Coursera, edX, to a lot of these sites and get the best professors in the world teaching courses at no charge. It's kind of like when you look at people during the Renaissance. So if you look at, Leibniz and Kant and Isaac Newton and all those people, you're just like, oh my God, the Renaissance were great. And guess what? The amount of mathematics and computing most even great thinkers had, you could learn in a community college. Okay? It's just not that crazy anymore. It was amazing for them to be as creative and thoughtful. And I'm not saying, obviously, Isaac Newton equals a community college kid. I'm just saying access to information has enabled anyone to have, that much knowledge if they work really, really hard at it. Now, they won't be as creative probably, but that's a different story. So you go to college today for different reasons. You learn for different reasons. And I think this whole aura of I have a PhD and I have X, Y, Z, I think the world is changing and how people consume information changes. Just look at 4 or 5-year-old kids. They're able to go on YouTube. They're able to go online. They're able to search. They're able to find information in very different ways. And the way they process information is probably 100 times faster than, even 1 or 2 generations ago. There's just the way they take bites of information and they build relationship is very different. So you look at universities, there's over 5,000 universities just in the U.S. Unless you're a top 100 and just to let you know, there's about $450 billion of endowment in the country. Over 80% of that is controlled by less than 100 universities. The top 500 universities, the other 400, have another 15% of that. So about 5% of all the endowment out there gets spread across another 3,500, 4,000 universities, or 4,500 universities. So what happens to these universities? Now they're going, well, we spend billions of dollars over, decades building a university. There's just not enough students. There's 3 million less students that are going to college. The birth rate has now diminished, and people have way different ways of learning. So I do believe unless universities start thinking about education in a very, very different and dramatic ways, I think most universities are going to continue going into the red, and they're not going to be sustainable. But I think there are a lot of smart people working at these universities, and we're going to see the way we look at degrees, the way we look at learning, the way we look at consumption, and the way we measure outcome for higher education is changing dramatically. And universities who figure how to adapt to that are going to stay around. Universities who refuse to adapt to the new paradigm, they're not. I mean, just look at today. There are a lot of colleges today that just refuse to go online. or they're just postponing it. Well, guess what? With coronavirus, if you don't have a great online
Mm-hmm.
program, how are you going to sustain yourself? And I think with coronavirus, now that students from K to 12 have to stay home and people have to learn at university level online, I think online learning is going to get disrupted for this particular experience. It's already gotten disrupted, but now it's going to get amplified because once you sit at home and you're able to learn on-demand learning at your own pace, guess what? More people are going to say, hey, this ain't half bad, you know? So this is going to cause a lot of changes in people's mind if it keeps going on for much longer. But I also think outside of that, how you learn is changing as well. So I'm very, very curious to see how institutions are going to respond to this, this dynamic of higher learning.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's sort of this kind of wild race, I think, in terms of just everybody kind of shifting to this like remote education model and everything. And my hope would be that it continues to kind of push the trend of digital education in all its forms and all those sort of things for both students' sake and institutions' sake. That I think there's a lot of value in it as a kind of parallel modality for students to seek short courses, certificates, degree programs, all that good stuff. So it's definitely like a really really important trend, and certainly just some sort of catalyst. What the results of it are going to be yet to be seen, but definitely a really important thing to keep an eye on. So I guess in addition to that, then like anything that you're kind of like looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world. So any one of those things or all of those things, just anything that you are looking forward to. It's always a nice optimistic note to end the episode on.
I am looking forward to providing access to students, everywhere in the country and hopefully at some point around the world. I think every student, if you could show them a pathway of, hey, here's a formula of success, come on PLEXUSS or wherever you need to go and connect with these other students who are your friends. If you don't have a good network, create a new network of friends that could enable you. Let's connect you with other students, alumni, and mentors. And don't give up on your potential, right? So I think technology is actually used properly could solve a lot of issues for a lot of people. So imagine you could now have mentors, you could have networking on a virtual basis, you could learn virtually, you could find jobs virtually. And also, we've been working on this incredible project, which is we could pretty much tell you if you have an idea where you want to live, what are some careers that you should be thinking about? Why is it good to not just learn computer science, but maybe if you're learning hard sciences like computer science and data and machine learning, we think you should also use your other side of the brain to learn philosophy and art and music and other disciplines. So, how do we use technology to give access to people, to create a network, but also guide people to create a balance in life, because life only gets more complicated. It doesn't get simpler, okay? And the more that you learn, the less that you know. And how do you become better problem solvers? It's not just mathematics sometimes. It's not just, sometimes 1 + 1 = 5, and it doesn't equal 2, okay? And you kind of have to say, well, why did this happen the way it happened? And I think building human beings that could think both quantitatively and also in an art form is a recipe for success. I think if you could train people to get to that point and start building their mind holistically, our approach to problems is going to evolve infinitely. So I just don't see an end in sight for what we're doing. I just want to continue growing this and make sure that with our team and the whole community that cares about higher education, we build the next generation of great problem solvers and great thinkers.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely like, both the kind of functional skills, but also the critical thinking for sure, both equally valuable. And just seeing all the new and amazing ways that we can help kind of deliver that to students so that they grow into having that kind of beautiful harmony in the way that they go through the world. So, well, I appreciate your time and all that you shared, and we'll have ways to connect with the work that you're doing in the show notes. But just really great stuff, and I'm just very grateful that we were able to get connected, even in lieu of being able to potentially meet in person at the conference. But again, just thank you so much for hanging out for the podcast. This is awesome.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the good work that you're doing, and bearing with my long-winded answers. So thank you.
No worries. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek podcast.